Yeah, this is part two of the documentary. Are You Mad? All the finest people are, and it's about the arts. It's about writing. It's about poetry. It's about just writing in general and how therapeutic it is on people's healing journey and for their own mental health.
I think for me, it's like it's been sort of my greatest source of well-being. Um, we said that like life moves so quickly. When I go home of a night and write, I can slow it down just enough to understand it, just to understand a little bit and go, so that's what happened today. And then also by slowing it down, you see the magic in it that you might have missed. As regards mental health wise, I've had my own struggles, but I think writing has pretty much saved my life, or at least give me a better way to live. You know, writing was a handy tool. You live a certain way, and in the end, you've got to change. Like I always remember, like God, I think I was about 32, and the first time I'd been to see a counsellor, I was sitting in the spiritual counsellor's office, and he was like, "Jed, you've told me a lot of stories about your past life, and in a lot of them, you seem to be punching people in the face." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And he was like, "Why?" I said, "Well, they deserved it." And he was like, "Did they? Why?" And I was telling them, and he was like, "Jed, you do know that you can't just go around punching people in the face because you don't agree with the behaviour." And I was like, "Of course you can." And he was like, "No, you can't." I was like, "You can." And he was like, "No, you can't." And I was like, "Oh shit, what a few apologies to make here." So I sort of like, after growing up in this way, where I sort of in my late teens, early 20s were like quite violent, you know. And it's that thing about becoming a young man, like how do you measure yourself? And the way I did was through, you know, mostly fist fights. And it was sort of, I had to find this new way of living. I had to find a new way of expressing myself. And I've always said that like darkness is the womb in which a poet is born. I was in this darkness and I didn't know how to express myself and I didn't know what to do. And I went home and I started writing. And I kept writing and the stuff that was coming out was so dark. I didn't know at the time, I was purging my system. And like the people around me didn't know what was going on. They were like, "What's he doing?" He's like writing poems and stuff. And it really freaked people out. It was like Jed's lost the plot. He's writing stories and stuff. But I was just grasping for another way. I think the turning point was when I started to write fairy tales for my young son. I started writing these stories about leprechauns and fairies and stories of hope, because that was what I needed in my life at the time. I just needed some hope. And then obviously I work on a building site as well, and the lads are like, you know, you're in the brew room telling stories about leprechauns, and the lads are like, Sparks lost the plot. But then other people were saying to me in the creative community, they're really good, you want to put them in a book. So I put them in a book, and then I became an author. And that sort of gives you like this social credibility. It's like, oh, he's not a nutcase anymore, he's just eccentric, he's an author. So you sort of get like your eccentricity license, then you can do what you want, you can say whatever you want because you're socially accepted as an author. But as an electrician who tells stories about leprechauns, you haven't got a chance, you know, you're just a nutcase. So I think, and then the fairy tales opened a whole new world into different communities, the poetic community, the conscious community. I made new friends. I found like-minded people who were searching for something more, who wanted, there's got to be a better way to live than this. And we were all saying, and we didn't quite know how, but somewhere between us all, we got a few of the answers. And I think, yeah, whereas I was already ready for a change, the poetry became a catalyst for it. It became the wave I rode, you know, that supplied the energy for it, gave me the tools to think and live introspectively, and then come back into the external world and say, okay, let's try something different. This isn't working. Let's look inside, what's missing, what's wrong, and then move forward in a better way. This poem's called The Greatest Poem in the World. A friend of mine once asked me what the greatest poem in the world was, and I said, well, it'll probably be hidden away in a book somewhere or in someone's cupboard, because nobody else will find it. It'll be be part of someone's healing mechanism that they hide away. And the poem goes like this. In a place no one's heard of, in an anonymous home, in a dusty old cupboard sits an anonymous poem. Its pages are yellowed and its corners are curled. Hidden away here, the greatest poem in the world. And one day they'll find it and questions will start like, who was the girl that had broken his heart? The scholars will say it's a fine masterpiece and that all of their acts of poetry can cease. The bards in despair will put down their quills, now feeling inadequate in their poetry skills. It'll be the last poem ever written for thousands of years, written by a boy who in secret cried words and not tears.
So my name is Lauren. I am the creator of the Wild Warrior Women. I first started exploring writing when I was a little girl. It felt like it was the only place that I could find freedom. It was the place that I went to escape. I grew up with a lot of trauma, and I felt like I was really suppressed and silenced in my home due to my upbringing and my childhood. And my paper and pen was it become my safe space, the place that I could explore all my imagination. And growing up, what I began to realise is the world seemed brighter and lighter in my head and with my paper and pen. That became my prophecy. As I grew up and I went through school, I was always misbehave. I would never sit still. And the two subjects that I really excelled in was art, expression and writing. I remember the teacher would be like absolutely in shock because I'd be writing war-torn poems at the age of 8, and she just couldn't believe what was actually coming out of my body and, my mind. And this led on to senior school as well. I'd always get kicked out of class for being very disruptive, but in all honesty, if it doesn't light me up, I didn't want to do it then, and it's very much the same right now. So I get kicked out and I get allowed to go and sit in my English class and my art class. It's fair to say in those subjects I absolutely soared. And I began to write short stories from a very, very young age. I knew that I was going to write a book. It's something that I haven't done yet, but it's one of my biggest dreams. And I began to share these poems of how I was feeling through the suppression and the emotional abuse of people, relationships, heartbreak. And very quickly, I began to have people tell me that I have a gift, a way of cultivating and bringing the shadow and the things that people feel really fucking uncomfortable talking about to light. And in that's when I was able to inspire other people to begin to look at themselves and things. I started putting myself out there on social media. I actually was under a fake account of the Wild Wounded Warrior Woman, and I started sharing stories and I started writing really, really intense things about sex, about abuse, about manipulation, attention seeking, all of the things that people don't want to admit that they've got going on in their life. Relationships crumbling, the way that we feel suppressed, that we're wearing masks. And I started putting them out there. And it got a really good following. Everybody began to really enjoy them, and they were like, who's this person behind this profile? And I think it was easier, it felt easier at the time for me to express myself in all of my totality then, because I really didn't have to show my face. And I think at that part of my journey, I was still fearing judgment, because some of the things that I was saying, it was like, but a part of my journey of waking up and wanting to be my authentic self, I realised that I really did need to stand in my power. I needed to speak my truth, and I needed to share it with the world as me. Do you remember when you would pick flowers and make potions from the earth alone? Do you remember how your nightlight would fight the shadows of the unknown? You'd wrap yourself in your quilt and you would feel safe. You would call in your angels to stand guard in their place. Do you remember thinking the moon would follow you wherever you would go? If you ever got lost, it would return you home. Do you ever remember mounting your first ever bike? The stabilizers would come off and it was your first experience of feeling alive. Do you remember jumping from couch to couch, scared of falling into the carpet where the crocodiles would pounce? Do you remember having an imaginary friend, someone to confide in when you were scared the world would end? Do you ever remember feeling so different and alone, fearing death because you didn't realise that's actually when you return home? Do you remember wishing your time away and all you wanted was to grow up and to stop playing? And look at you now. Does your life suck? Do you wish that you were that little child, playing freely in the grass where your mind was empty and your imagination ran wild? You chased stars magnetised by the moon and let the sun caress your face. What happened? What made your freedom be replaced? Do you remember when you weren't scared to jump in, when a small sand dune felt like you were jumping off a cliff? Do you ever remember dancing with your mum in the kitchen, singing into the utensils, banging the pans, not afraid of everybody listening? When did you stop dancing just because? When did you begin to close your heart? When did your tiny little bewildered spirit begin to fall apart? Did the Dementors come and suck the life out of you, suppress you and tighten the walls you've built to keep you safe? But now you're choking on consumption and real joy's being replaced. Can you reach to the sky and grab a star like the spark once more in your hopeful heart? Jump fucking in. Jump into that ocean, to arms, to love, to experience, to pain, to heartache, to life. Do you remember what it feels like to run, to face the sun, to come undone? Let go of your illusionary expectations you place on yourself. Let go of the limitations. Let go of the judgments of your mind you no longer have to hide. Do you remember what it feels like to absolutely feel, to taste, to devour, to enjoy, to scream, to be touched, to be seen, to be heard, to be celebrated, to be loved? To just do it without needing to know where it leads? Do you remember when you enjoyed the path instead of needing to know the destination? When every creek, every corner was an exciting temptation? Get your feet dirty, deepen them into the soil, and feel the roots of the earth kiss your feet. Fucking do that thing that you are terrified. I know you are scared, but there is a little child inside of you cheering you on. The one who sat alone in the garden with their face towards the sun. And what if you do fall flat on your face? But what if you fly, darling, fly? Know that there's no race. When was it last you closed your bountiful heart? When did you realise you're living but you don't actually feel alive? The key to growing up is to grow but to still be that child. Life can be messy, tangled, dirty and untamed. Be spontaneous and courageous. Don't be afraid. Don't live to work, live to live. Let every experience pierce deeply your skin. And smile. Oh, don't forget to smile. Another opportunity for you to run wild. Be free, little one. Turn your face to the sun and come undone.
So my name's Corinne. I'm going to explain how I use writing as a tool to assist me with my mental health. I think the best place to start is to explain how I found writing and where it all started for me. As a very, very young girl, I used to write short haikus, if you will, with very, very small words. That's something that just fizzled out for me over time, but I always kept diary entries. I didn't really understand how important it would be to me until my early teen years. I was 18 and I started partying a lot earlier than I probably should have, actually, doing all of the things that you can imagine that happen in the party scene. If you couple that with severe suppressed trauma from living in an alcoholic household, from attempting to be the matriarchal figure, and to one day just ultimately having enough, I was stuck, I was frozen, and I popped like a champagne bottle and I found myself in Broadook as an 18-year-old. There's no words to explain what I experienced in that place. I was 18 in a psych ward where seeing people physically trying to hurt themselves day in, day out, and I was very blessed in that. I had a very lovely doctor who, I think he's seen that I was young and I wasn't as troubled as the people that was there. I knew I wasn't as troubled as the people that was there too, and he asked me, he knew I was basically keeping back and suppressing because that's all I ever knew to do, and I was taught to do, to learn behaviours. And he gave me an opportunity. I was going to get sections. I was already under voluntary section and I wasn't helping myself because I was having outbursts, and he gave me a chance and said, what's an outlet? And I said, I write. And he told me to write down everything that made me be in front of him today. And I'd never thought of doing that before and using it as an outlet. So I went back to my bed in the psych ward and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and I didn't know my pen could go so fast, and the relief that I had, I didn't even know I could go home at this point. The doctor said if what I wrote was true enough, he'd let me go home. So I wrote and I wrote till my heart's content, and I showed him to the doctor and he said I could go home, ironically. So from that day I vowed that I'd always write, not necessarily poems, but just always dump whatever was going on in my head on the pages, because I had that lived and learned experience that getting it out of there and onto there will always be better than keeping it on there. It's like having a sock drawer full of odd socks that just keeps overflowing and overflowing, and the second you start to pull them out and pair them, just like putting pen to paper, it all starts to get a little bit easier. The pain, the pressure, that uneasy feeling that's quite the opposite of pleasure. The pain, the pressure, that feeling where the only way to measure is when it's all already come crumbling down together. You know that this won't be forever, but when will it be when you can actually get your head together? From the tension headaches to the naps that you've been taking on your lunch breaks, to that crackling feeling in your heart, you know, that literal physical ache. For goodness sake, when will these feelings alleviate? I've tried to meditate, and Lord knows I like to medicate. Naturally, of course, because, well, I've been there before and I've had that course of antidepressants, and, well, we all know that this just acts as a suppressant to wall that you're feeling, leaving no room for actual healing. I've said it before and I'll say it again. To feel is to heal. So don't worry if you're sat there crying over your evening meal. Have faith and know that you're being provided with all the tools you need to deal with this temporary state of mind, which I know often feels like others are blind to. But rest assured that this isn't only happening to you.
Writing's helped me throughout my healing process. For so long I had no voice around myself, or wasn't able to communicate or speak about, what I was going through. So I lived a life in silence. Throughout my journey I started to kind of awaken and realise there was a lot going on underneath the surface. There was a lot going on through the mental loops. There was a lot buried underneath it. And as I started to kind of dig and get the loops and the roots up through the mind, the only way I could alchemize the story and the pain and what I was going through was through writing, through creating something that meant something, that allowed me to understand myself first of all, and understand what I was going through and what I was experiencing, so that it could translate my soul and myself and my experiences into something that could be understood. Because a lot of the time when you go through something really traumatic, people can't hear it in the same way. People don't understand or can relate or, really empathize with what you're going through. And I found the only way I could express it, where it could be understood and where it could be heard, was through writing, was through poetry and songwriting. I'm a songwriter, and that way I could express myself without feeling the need to filter myself or feeling the need to, keep it in or not tell people or, keep it silent. It was a way that people could access what I was going through myself and understand, because, a lot of the time some things are just too hard to comprehend. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and that affects my mental health quite extremely, alongside of, you know, anxiety and depression. So I have real deep lows, and the only way I can I can kind of get myself out of those lows is through creation and writing and expressing myself. And then I seem to reach these kind of, you know, peaks of truth, and where the light comes in is through the writing. And it's almost like when I'm in those lows, something's being created, and I'm working something out in my brain and my mind. And as I surrender, then it's like the light pours in, and then the words come through, or the songs come through, and it's so beyond me that it makes the lows worthwhile. It makes it okay. It makes it bearable when you've got something tangible. You've created something from that feeling of despair. You know, something that every time you sing it, it helps to, or say it helps to shift out of that frequency and into the light, into the higher realms. They say just be positive, but what about the negative? The polarity shift, how all reality exists depends on this. There is no proton without the neutron unifying to make electrons, an electric current of emotion, just longing for expression. Well, my channel is open here, so will you welcome all of my tears as I express my deepest fears, or is it too hard to deal with? Easier to believe that what's happening isn't real, tempting to watch a reel than to address how you really feel. Screens becoming smoke machines sheening over our reality, deceiving our perceiving, manipulating our feelings by distracting us with memes. But we can't just turn a blind eye to the darkness in disguise that finds a way to hide through the maze of the mind. To the edge of madness I must ride to find this gift inside, so pure and so divine, an intricate design. Hidden beyond a fear so strong that for some time every night I closed my eyes, felt like I was gonna die, but I am alive. Yes, I survived, and what I needed couldn't be prescribed. I found it all inside, so let the light out, let the light out, let the light out. Am I insane, or is it sane to not say anything and brush it under the carpet and just say I'm hysteric? Or we could listen to the cries of a world full of lies so we can fully realize the truth in these eyes. It's going to take some time to listen to the cries and a shattering of the mind so we can understand the problem we have at hand. It's an epidemic of denial, global betrayal, and this energy surging through me is shattering an elusive reality, and that's okay with me. The truth will set us free, so let the light out, let the light out, let the light out. Diagnosed with PTSD, feeling excluded from society and pushed out of my community, we all long for more humanity, all living in our own bubbles, but we share the same troubles. We all have trauma, we came from the same mother. I've travelled through time to reclaim what was mine, taken from the child, preserved and now returned, passed through pain as my brain inflamed, struggling to eat again, trembling, eyes remain, hyper aware in any situation that may occur, flashback, restore, now my creativity soars. So let the light out, let the light out, let the light out. I know the intensity of this electricity surging through me causes a great velocity of energy, and I am willing to take accountability for my part in the disturbance caused as the illusions fall. There's no need to blame, just accept and make change, and we'll blow the system put in place to defend these programs designed to erase the patterns woven through the constructs, though what you watch on Netflix cannot distract from the actual facts of these damaging physical acts.
Time to break the silence, no one keeping up the appearance. The truth cannot be hidden, we must free all of our children. Challenge the abusers, do not protect their illusions. Big light into the shadows to illuminate our tomorrows. Have the bravery to stand up for what you know is right. Do not cower at the sight of what dares to be bright. And we'll create a world that includes the viewpoint of the truth. I know it's hard to see the roots, but it's harder to continue the cycle of abuse. We must be brave. Look at my face. There are tears on my cheek, holding my fears as I speak. I am not weak. This is what we must teach. So let the light out, let the light out, let the light out.
stood